for a minute about back bends. So when we do a back bend, what we're asking our spine to do is to move into something called extension. But here's the thing, our spine is already naturally back bendy in the lower back, your lumbar spine, and in the cervical spine. So that means here and here. And particularly in about this section of the back, where your back goes from being round to moving inwards, the junction between your thoracic and your lumbar, well, this is a place where your little spinous processes here get short. In short, the bones move a lot, and it's a lot easier to hinge at this spot in your back. Now, most of us in our lives don't need to hinge at that part of our back, right? We spend our lives like this, typing, driving, doing all of these things. What we really need to do is move the back bend into our upper back. But this part of the back tends to be really mobile on a lot of us. So what we need to do in order to do back bend safely is stabilize the parts of the back that are naturally very back bendy, which is going to be the neck and the lower back, and move our back bend more into the upper back where we really need to open, find more space. It will improve our ability to breathe. It will create more strength in our postural muscles. So when we're practicing or when we're teaching, here's the moral of the story. You need to stabilize the pelvis and the low back, move the back bend really into the upper back where it's a little tighter and stiffer, and stabilize the neck. Let's look at this in a pose like camel. So in camel pose, if I were to do camel pose in a very kind of compensatory, path of least resistance sort of way, I could do a hinge at my low back, flip my neck back, and call this back bend. But as you can see, I'm not actually doing any back bend in my upper back. I'm just kind of falling into the place where it's the easiest in my low back. So instead, what we want to do is stabilize the pelvis. And one great way to do this is by using what I call paired actions. So some of you may have encountered this with me before. We take the inner thighs back a little bit, keep that, and then wrap the sitting bones down. So this lengthening of the sitting bones down helps to activate your glutes. It also helps to activate your core. I usually like to keep the bottom ribs in a little bit. I want to contain this space here to support my lumbar spine. And now I keep all of that action as I draw the shoulders back and start to move the back bend into my upper back. Now this is a much more challenging camel. Then we just have one more thing to figure out, which is oftentimes rather than doing the back bend where it's challenging, the upper back, we just throw the head back because that's where it's the easiest, right? Here I'm doing a back bend, right? No. Instead, resist that. Again, stabilize the pelvis, move the back bend really up between the shoulder blades, and then draw the chin in slightly. So rather than being tempted to throw the head back, I really have to stabilize the neck. So that's how we can practice and teach back bends in a way that is more optimal for our back. It will help to stabilize the lumbar spine, and it will also help to move the back bend where we need it most, which is really into the upper back. Now, one thing I do want to talk about here is a little bit of refinement of the alignment of the legs. So when we do a back bend, our glutes, which is our big old muscle here, usually needs to work, right? So let's say I'm doing bridge pose. I lay on my back in bridge pose, I lift my hips up, and for most of us, our knees go wide. Why is this? It's because of the glutes. So in addition to helping me lift my hips up, the glutes are also going to cause my legs to externally rotate. So you may have heard this in class or said it yourself, squeeze your legs together, right? So when we squeeze the legs together, we're helping to keep the thighs neutral in the pelvis, which can be a good thing because sometimes if I externally rotate too much here, it gets a little squishy in the low back and makes it harder for me to keep my low back nice and long. So here's strategy one. Press the feet down. Keep the thighs parallel by hugging the legs in a little bit. You could even put a block between your thighs, and then lift your hips up. Here I'm doing the same thing. I really want to stabilize my pelvis. So I take my inner thighs slightly down, lengthen the sitting bones towards the knees. That helps to lengthen the lower back. And now I'm going to put the work into my upper back by lifting my chest to my chin. So it's the exact same principles that we did in camel pose here in bridge. Whoa. And that's a great back bend. And then we come on down. But I want to add one more thing. I want to add a little bonus here, which is a way that you may not have done back bends before that I want to show you in bridge pose. And for this, you'll need a strap. Now, before we do bridge pose again, I just want to pause for a little anatomy lesson. So when we squeeze the thighs together, as you'll often hear in yoga class, squeeze the legs together, bring the inner thighs closer, scissor the legs, hug your legs to the midline, all these cues are engaging a set of muscles that lie along the insides of your legs, called the adductors. And the adductors run from your pelvis down to your thigh, and they help to squeeze everything in.
Winter Sale. Zimowa wyprzedaż.
But there's another set of stabilizing muscles, my friends, that live on the outside of the hip. And if you stand for a moment with me, bring your hands onto the outsides of your hips, and then press your feet wide, you can feel these guys start to light up. There's a bunch of muscles that lie here on the outside of your hip that run down and attach onto your thigh bone here. And this is glute medius and glute minimus. And there's also another little guy here called TFL. Anyways, these guys kind of wrap from the outside of your pelvis down to your thigh bone. And when you press your feet wide, you can feel them kind of pop and fire underneath your hands. So these are also excellent stabilizers for the pelvis. And what is good for stabilizing the pelvis is good for stabilizing the lower back. And here's the nerdy thing. So when we squeeze the thighs together, we're creating a little bit of hugging in, yes, but also a little bit of internal rotation, which means that this thigh is turning in slightly. And that counteracts the external rotation of glute max. Here's the nerdy moment for you, my friends, because I just found out about this and I think it's so cool. These guys on the outside of your hips, glute medius, which is the big guy, glute minimus, which lies right underneath, TFL, which is also a little guy running here in the front. These guys tend to wrap around, and glute medius and minimus attach more on the front of your trochanter. This is that big honkin' knob on the outside of your thigh. So what does this mean? This means that these muscles, the anterior fibers here, can also help to internally rotate your legs, just like your adductors. So sometimes when I'm practicing back bends and a teacher says squeeze your thighs together to keep them neutral, squeeze in, sometimes that feels a little compressy and a little crunchy. So I want us to try bridge pose now, and instead of stabilizing our thigh from the inside and squeezing in, we're going to stabilize it by pressing out. So grab a strap and let's take a look. So here we are back about to do bridge pose, and I want you to take your strap and make a loop in it so it's about, thighs distance apart. And then we'll take our legs inside. Bring your strap about midway up your thighs. And what we're going to do is press our thighs wide. Remember when we did that, these guys started to turn on. So rather than hugging in, which sometimes feels a little bit crunchy, we're going to see if we can stabilize bridge pose by pressing our thighs out. So come on and lay down onto your back. Make your feet parallel. Lay down. Press firmly into your feet. Lift your hips up. And now press your thighs wide into your strap. And as you do that, I want you to visualize the inner thighs rolling down a little bit more. And then keep that. Even try to scrub your heels wide a little bit more. And take your sitting bones towards your knees. So we're creating that nice length in the lumbar spine. And so a little bit of a different way of stabilizing this pose. And then press the elbows down, press the tops of your shoulders down, and now move the back bend way into the upper back. So pull the back of your ribs in, release the back of your head to the floor. Keep pressing your thighs into the strap. And then slowly come on down. And then notice, what was that like in your body? So I want you to play with this a little bit. Try stabilizing your back bends by the squeezing in action, but then see if you can try to stabilize your back bends with the outer hips as well. And notice if you feel any difference in your own body in terms of the space you get for your lumbar spine. Maybe it feels a little bit better through your legs and through your pelvis. So check it out in your classes, check it out with your students, and see what you think.